now to some big news out of the United Center. The Blackhawks have announced that Patrick Kane is officially returning to Chicago. Showtime has signed a 2-year contract for $8 million a year. That deal brings him back to the team that first drafted him and where he won 3 Stanley Cups.
Patrick Kane just signed a 2-year, $16 million contract to return to the Chicago Blackhawks. The deal carries an $8 million cap hit each season, and it includes a full no-movement clause. Blackhawks general manager Kyle Davidson made the announcement Thursday, calling it a moment 16 seasons in the making. Day in and day out for 16 seasons, Patrick captivated the city of Chicago with his dazzling skill, creating some of the most memorable moments in Blackhawks history as he helped bring our storied franchise back to the pinnacle of our sport. Davidson said in his statement, "Let's start with the numbers, because they tell you exactly how both sides value this reunion. Kane's new deal is worth $16 million over 2 years, with an average annual value of $8 million against the salary cap. That number matters for 2 reasons. First, it shows the Blackhawks are treating Kane as a genuine top 6 contributor, not a nostalgia move on a league minimum deal. Second, the full no-movement clause tells you Chicago isn't planning to trade him again. He controls where he plays for the life of this contract." Kane's agent, Pat Brisson, added context on how the process unfolded. He said there were roughly 10 legitimate suitors pursuing Kane once free agency opened. That's a serious number for a 37-year-old winger, and it shows teams still view him as a difference maker, not a player winding down his career. Davidson didn't hold back on what this means for the franchise either. He's shown on countless occasions that he knows what it takes to win at the highest levels, and we couldn't be prouder for Patrick to once again call the United Center home and continue to shine in Chicago's brightest lights, he said. "This is a front office putting real money and real term behind a player they traded away just 3 years ago. That alone tells you how much has changed in Chicago. To understand why this signing matters, you need to understand what Kane already built in Chicago. He was selected first overall by the Blackhawks back in 2007. Over his first 16 seasons with the franchise, he won 3 Stanley Cups in 2010, 2013, and 2015. He captured the Calder Trophy as Rookie of the Year in his debut season, the Conn Smythe Trophy as Playoff MVP in 2013, and both the Hart Trophy and the Ted Lindsay Award in 2015-16, a season where he led the entire NHL with 106 points. In terms of franchise history, Kane sits second in Blackhawks career points with 225, trailing only Hall of Famer Stan Mikita. He's third in franchise goals and third in games played for an original 6 team with more than a century of history behind it. After Chicago traded him to the New York Rangers in 2023, followed by a hip resurfacing procedure, Kane rebuilt his game with the Detroit Red Wings. Last season alone, he posted 57 points on 16 goals and 41 assists in 67 games, proving he still produces at a high level even in his late 30s. So this isn't a farewell tour signing. It's a productive veteran walking back into the building where his legacy started, with real statistical evidence that he still belongs. Here's something that adds real weight to this story. Kane didn't just pick the easy option. Reports indicate he spent roughly 3 weeks weighing 2 paths, returning to Chicago or signing with his hometown Buffalo Sabres. Kane grew up in Buffalo, and joining the Sabres would have meant playing for his childhood team. Instead, he chose Chicago, the organization where his NHL career actually began and where he built his entire championship legacy. There's another factor that likely simplified this decision. Jonathan Toews, Kane's longtime teammate and fellow franchise cornerstone, has retired. When Davidson traded Kane in 2023, he explained his reasoning was to give the next generation of Blackhawks players, led by Connor Bedard, room to grow into leadership roles without deferring to franchise legends. With Toews now retired, that complication is gone. Chicago only has 1 legend walking back through the door, not 2. Kane had already been skating at the Blackhawks practice facility over the summer, even before the contract became official. That's not something a player does casually. It shows where his mindset was heading well before the ink dried. Now let's talk about timing, because this signing directly affects the biggest name already on Chicago's roster. Connor Bedard underwent shoulder surgery earlier this month and is expected to miss the start of the 2026-27 season into early November. That leaves a real gap at the top of Chicago's lineup to open the year. Kane is expected to help fill that void immediately, with the plan being for him to eventually move onto Bedard's wing once Bedard returns to full health. Bedard himself has already spoken about the possibility of playing alongside Kane. "I can't imagine his first game back at the United Center with the Blackhawks, the reaction he'd get, and how much juice that would bring to not only our team but our fans as well," Bedard said. "That would be incredible to play with him and learn from him." That's a young franchise centerpiece publicly welcoming a returning legend, and it says a lot about how the locker room views this move. This isn't an older player being brought in to occupy a roster spot. It's a mentorship and production opportunity that both sides seem genuinely excited about. Chicago hasn't made the playoffs since the 2019-20 season, the year cut short by the pandemic, which was also the last season Kane spent with the team before his departure. Pairing him with a healthy, motivated Bedard gives this roster its most dangerous top-line potential in years. Let's zoom out and look at what this signing represents for the organization as a whole. When Davidson traded Kane and let Tews walk in 2023, he was explicit about wanting a clean slate for the rebuild. At the time, he said he didn't foresee reversing that decision. 2 years later, he has fully reversed course, and he's done it by giving Kane real money, real term, and full no-movement protection. That's a franchise signaling confidence, not desperation. The team is far enough along in its rebuild, with Bedard locked up long-term, that adding a proven veteran scorer now accelerates the timeline instead of distracting from it. Blackhawks ambassador and former defenseman Chris Chelios weighed in on what Kane still means to this fanbase, pointing to the emotional reception Kane received during his jersey retirement ceremony a couple years back as proof that his connection to the city never faded. Kane now enters his 20th NHL season with a chance to add to a legacy that's already cemented in Blackhawks history. He's chasing franchise records in goals, assists, and total points, all categories where he already ranks inside the top 3 in team history. So here's what we know for certain. Patrick Kane signed a 2-year, $16 million deal with a full no-movement clause to return to the Chicago Blackhawks. He chose the franchise where he built 3 Stanley Cup championships over his own hometown team. He's expected to help cover for an injured Connor Bedard early in the season, then eventually play alongside him. And the front office that once traded him away is now fully committed to bringing him home for good. This is a franchise betting on both nostalgia and production at the same time, backed by real statistics and a player who is still performing at a high level heading into his 20th NHL season.